If you caught my last video, you know that I've been doing some aquabiomics testing on my new Red Sea tank. Now, in the last video, I walked through and I showed you what it looks like step by step, how to collect a sample. Now, this video is going to go over all of the results from the environmental DNA sample that I took from my tank. Eli from Aquabiomics has generously given his time, and we are going to go through step by step and talk about the results from my tank, as well as show you how to read the results from your aquabiomics test. Stay tuned. Okay guys, as you can see, I'm here joined with Eli, who is the owner of Aquabiomics. I thought it would be a fun thing because my test results are now in to talk to Eli a little bit, and then let's go through some of the results. And it can be kind of complicated, so I feel like you're probably the best person to walk us through all this, right?
Happy to, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of details in these reports and a lot of scientific names.
Yes.
I try to give some explanations in the report and links to more explanations, but I think it would be useful to walk through it and give you an overview. Yeah. So which one would you like to start with?
Let's start with the environmental DNA.
So I'm just going to scroll through this, give you kind of my thought process when I'm looking at one of these reports. You know, the way I do this, I run everything in a batch, and so at the end of the batch, my programs generate a bunch of these reports. And just like the user, I open these up and scroll through them and make a few decisions about the report. Now, the first thing I always do is I ask, did this work? Is this a high quality sample? You know, do we have a good profile of the community in this tank?
Mm-hmm.
Couple of things I look at to answer that question. One is right here, the diversity. 221 different types of DNA sequences we detected in your sample. That absolute number probably doesn't mean much to the average user, but since I've looked at a lot of these reports, I have the sense that if you have more than 200 different types in your sample, I judge that it's probably a reasonably complete picture of what's in your tank. Another detail I look at for this kind of quality control question, I go down to the sample composition. There's some cases where the sample's dominated by like a single type. It could be an organism we expect to find in the tank, or it could be some random contaminant. We've seen that before. In any case, yours isn't dominated by a single type. It's got a lot of different types in here. With that said, you see this big dark blue bar here?
Yes.
We'll come back to this in a second. This is a really striking finding and, you know, worth mentioning. There is one type of DNA that made up about 60% of your sample.
Wow.
Come back to that in a minute. I judged that this was kind of a good enough sample. I expect to have a reasonably complete picture of the community. So now let's go through some of the kind of diagnostic decisions that are made in the report. So the first one is up here about parasites. None of the DNA sequences from your sample match known parasites. Yes. Okay, we find thousands of different DNA sequences, about 220 different types of them. Not one of them matched a known parasite. No ick, no uranema, yes. No velvet, right? So that's all good news.
I like to hear that.
Good. And I see that you're happy about it. That means it must kind of match what you're seeing, right? You don't have any observed symptoms of diseases in the tank currently?
Nope. Knock on wood, the tank is very healthy.
Yeah, good. So that's consistent with what we're seeing here. Other kind of diagnostics that the user might be interested in. Do I have a dinoflagellate problem? Do I have a diatom problem? And if so, what kind? Well, in your case, again, the answers are kind of summarized here. No, you have some dinoflagellate DNA, but perfectly normal levels. Less than 1% of your sample was dinoflagellates. Click on the View All Dinoflagellates tab. It gives you a list of the different types of dinoflagellates in your sample. And this can be interesting because reef keepers have ways of handling the different types of dinoflagellates depending on what you have in your tank. If you had a problem dinoflagellate in your tank, this would identify what it was, and that might give you clues about how to treat it. Same kind of idea, you know, it asks, how much diatom DNA do we have here? And then what kind of diatoms do you have here? In your case, this is just below the threshold. So
Ooh.
5% is where we say, okay, this is getting high enough that it's suggesting a possible diatom problem is brewing. Yours is just below that threshold, so it's not highlighted in red. If you click that section, you can see the kinds of diatoms in your sample, and these are all perfectly normal types, nothing unusual on this list. So let's look at what else can you learn about your sample. I'm going to scroll down past the graphs, and we're just going to dig into the detailed results at the end. So what I have here is the complete list of all the different stuff in your sample. So here's some of the diatoms, sponges, another common part of the community. And these are all very common types of sponges that we frequently see in aquariums. I think these are interesting things to look at because, very few of us go out and buy sponges to put in our aquariums. But we all somehow end up with sponges. They must get there through the live rock and sand and this sort of thing. So it can be kind of a marker for the maturity of a tank. Let's go ahead and scroll down to the maxillopods. So this is a group of crustaceans that includes, in this case, all of the ones that are shown are copepods. If you look at the top hit, just kind of highlight it there, you see that this makes up 63% of the DNA in your sample.
Oh,
that's kind of shocking. I don't think that this means that there's a huge, unusual population of copepods in your tank. I think there's a simpler explanation. Copepods are very small. I think you sucked one up while sampling. They're microscopic, right?
Yeah.
It's not even, it's not like user error. It's just kind of the luck of the draw. When you were pulling water out of your tank, I think you got a whole copepod. As a result, that big chunk of copepod tissue was a lot more DNA than all the dissolved free DNA that made up the rest of the sample. There's one last section that's worth talking about a bit here. This is a useful group to look at, but because it includes a lot of the known parasites, both of fish and corals. So the parasites that cause ick, the parasites that cause urinema, things like this. When I'm looking at a report, I like to see a bunch of ciliates in the report because I know there's ciliates in your tank. And if we've sampled the ciliate community thoroughly, but found no parasites, that gives me more confidence that your tank truly lacks parasites.
All right.
And that's the case here. We've got a nice long list of ciliates, all perfectly normal types. And that it includes some really low abundance types. If you go down to the bottom of the list, you'll see these are like 0.01% of the community, really, really low abundance. So it looks like we thoroughly sampled your ciliate community, didn't find any parasites.
I like that. That's
so
good.
Yeah, I think that supports our overall conclusion that looks like a parasite-free tank.
You have a high confidence that there are no parasites in my tank. Would that go to say that the vendors that I'm getting my fish and corals from are reputable, like they claim to be and have clean tanks? So this is just kind of further proof of that?
Yeah, I think that's a safe conclusion. You've brought material in, maybe live rock, maybe live sand, and certainly livestock, right? Fish and corals. And each one of those introductions puts stuff into your tank.
Yeah.
Little animals like copepods or other microscopic eukaryotes like the ciliates. None of this was deliberately introduced, right? It all was hitchhikers that came along with something else.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we haven't found any parasites, I think, says that the process you've used was safe. The vendors you used, or if you did a quarantine process or anything like that, the process you used to get here was a safe one. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much to Eli for taking the time to walk me through all of that, tell me what it means, and show me how to read it, and show you guys how to read it as well, and things to look for. If you enjoyed this, I highly encourage you to stay tuned for the third video in this series. We are going to meet back with Eli, who's going to go over the test results from the microbiome test that I did on this same tank. So stay tuned. This has been Hillary for Waterlogged on behalf of saltwateraquarium.com. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.